Have you ever seen a product advertised to you on Instagram and you've just clicked on it and, within 15 seconds, you're the owner of that product?
I think I'm pretty good at resisting the siren song of the Instagram products. It helps that some of the ones that I'm recommended are very dumb. Like I like Fiona the Hippo. Who doesn't like Fiona the Hippo?
Mm-hmm.
And so they are constantly trying to get me to buy shirts that are like Fiona and Fritz, Hippo love. I'm not that foolish.
Yeah, generally no, but I will say what I do a lot is I screen grab the product. And so I try to do the more conscious, all right, I'm going to keep it on my wish list or sitting here in my photos. And do I still want this product a week or a month later?
Okay, not no buy, but slow buy.
That's right.
We'll get there. This is Impromptu from Washington Post Opinions, a show that brings you conversations about the news we can't stop thinking about. I'm Drew Goins, author of the Today's Opinions newsletter.
And I'm Molly Roberts, a columnist at The Post. This week, we're talking about how much it matters what we buy and where we shop, or whether we shop at all. These days, we're surrounded by ads and influencers telling us to spend on all manner of stuff we absolutely don't need. But lately, there's a trend about resisting the urge, no buy 2025, where people are swearing off purchasing a subscription to streaming service number 7, or the 23rd color in their lipstick collection, and only spending on essentials.
On top of that, we're also in a moment where people are seeking power in today's political environment. So if a brand or company doesn't align with your values, you can vote with your dollars by spending them elsewhere. So is boycotting a brand a worthwhile tactic, or is it just another way the country is fracturing?
We're joined by our colleague Heather Long to talk through all of this.
Hi, I'm Heather Long, an economic columnist at the Washington Post and trying to be a more lean spender.
So, okay, speaking of that, Heather, there's this trend going on right now, no buy 2025. This isn't the first year that it's come up, but the idea being that you go through as much of the year buying as little as possible, ostensibly nothing outside of bills, groceries, the absolute necessities. What's going on with this? Is it just a way for people to save money? Is it an environmental thing? Is it actually feasible at all?
Well, when I first saw this trend resurge for Gen Z, I kind of smiled and said, okay, it's about time. Some of you may remember way back in the early 90s, the FIRE movement, which was financially independent, retire early. And that was this early movement of pushback against the buy everything consumerism of the 90s.
They are so back, by the way.
And then my generation, the millennials, right after the great financial crisis of 2010, embraced this movement, found it again. We started the Buy Nothing groups, and there were even people who were growing vegetables and challenging their homeowners association to be able to have a chicken coop in their backyard of their townhome, and sort of as the millennial version of this. So I've kind of been waiting for when is Gen Z going to get on this bandwagon? And so I think no buy in that sense. It makes sense to see it now. We went through the revenge spending coming out of the pandemic where everyone was buying just anything without really any rationale. And now then of course we had the huge inflation spike, and a lot of people are feeling it. And so it makes sense to retreat a little bit. I will say on a practical level, no buy, hey, if you can do it, power to you. What makes a lot more sense and where I feel much better is when I see people doing slow buy or low buy. That notion of we've gone from revenge spend to picky spend. I'm going to be very, very cautious.
I am very skeptical of no buy. I am one of those millennials who ate a lot of very bad backyard kale that my roommates grew in an attempt to save on groceries. So, the idea of no buy clearly appeals to me, or at least appealed to me at the time. But I'm so skeptical of it. I was reading a little bit about it in some magazine feature in Gen Z, and it quoted this quote-unquote no-buy influencer who says that she allows herself hair and nail appointments, a couple of Botox sessions, Pilates, and, quote, select experiences like travel, concerts, and movies.
What aren't you buying?
Right, exactly. So, I feel like this no-buy 2025 thing it's biting off so much that I think, Heather, you're right that what's much more feasible and satisfying are these slow buy. What was the other one you said?
Yes, or low buy.
Low buy. Right.
You also should be skeptical of this no-buy social media videos, because if you look at the actual data, I'm going to drop some data here. There's no way that a ton of people are not buying things. Like, that's just not reality. We have seen a huge, very strong consumer spending, great holiday season, for example. We just got some fresh data out this week on fourth quarter, economic growth, and it was a huge surge in consumer spending. Now, that doesn't mean all consumers are spending, or individual cases, but I think it's really hard to argue that this is somehow some national trend that is really biting into consumerism.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you can't be looking at the figures for fresh cut flowers or candles either, because this influencer said those are on her purchase list as well.
So we've been talking about how much we're buying, but I also want to get into how Americans are choosing brands and stores that align with their values. President Trump is trying to roll back diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the federal government. I'm sure you've all heard about this. And companies, surprise, surprise, are picking sides. Places like Walmart, Target, and Meta have reversed DEI policies, while companies like Costco, Apple, and Microsoft have reaffirmed their commitment to them. So, depending on where you stand, you might choose to buy from Costco and not Walmart. You might choose to hold on to your iPhone, but get rid of your Facebook account. What do you think about that, Heather?
I think you're 100% right that there's a recalibration going on in corporate America that's really fascinating to see. And there's I see two tracks. One is the corporations, some of that you have just mentioned, that are very publicly announcing where they stand on the spectrum, whether it's the tech CEOs standing right there on the platform with President Trump, or whether it's McDonald's and Target putting out these very public statements saying that they're rolling back or rescinding or ending their DEI policies. There's the other approach that I think is going to be fascinating to watch, and that's companies that seem to believe they can roll back to the 1990s in a more neutral stance. I think about that famous comment from Michael Jordan of even Republicans buy shoes too. And it's interesting. We've seen right now, I would say the most prominent examples are places like universities that have come out with these neutral. I'm going to be neutral again. Or we just saw the Federal Reserve was asked about DEI.
Right.
And, the Fed chair's kind of like, yes, we believe diversity. Yes, we believe executive orders. No more comment. That was like literally what he said. And so I don't know. I don't know which approach will make sense. What I will say is there's fascinating research. There's a great database that at Columbia University did this analysis of where brands are on the political spectrum. And they analyzed social media interactions with brands over a certain period of time. Costco, for instance, which came out very strong in favor of its DEI policies, their customer base is almost 70% Democrat. And so it makes sense for them to do very heavy into that, leaning into that customer base. At the same time, you look at Walmart. Walmart's one of those brands that's pretty close to 50-50. So it makes sense for them in this recalibration to try to get back to where they think the new center in America is. But it's really hard if you're somewhere in the middle. And Target is a perfect example of a brand that's somewhere in the middle. They're somewhere around the 60 to 65% Democrat. So they've leaned more that way, more than Walmart, but they're not in the Costco league.
Right.
And so I think they're really struggling, all those brands that are not lost, but they're sort of in this, I don't know what you call it, center-left speak. Is it a winning business strategy to try to get back towards the middle? We're going to find out. And it's a really tricky calculation.
Is that center-left spot where most brand identities congregated over the last 4 years, 8 years even, in the first Trump administration when it was trendier, I guess, to be a little bit in opposition, even at a corporate level, I guess?
Yes, I think you're 100% right that for a lot of consumer brands that they did migrate to the left. And it made sense, not just politically, but also, of course, in reaction to the horrific situation with George Floyd. I mean, a lot of America was shaken and people really felt the need to come out and respond. There's some brands that are always going to be associated with the right. You could probably think, somebody like Cabela's, for instance, is definitely going to stay very much in there. But what I found fascinating as I was looking through the database, there's really only three categories that kind of have stayed pretty central, pretty neutral over time. And I don't know if you want to guess. You want to take any guesses what those categories might be?
Three categories of companies?
Of business sectors, if you will. All right, I'll say one.
Oh, wait, no, I was going to gonna try. Well, I need a hint. I don't know. Maybe
I've
that is
stumped
not retail.
Jeopardy Drew. This is a really good moment for me.
What are grocery stores?
I was going to say grocery stores
Yeah,
too.
sort of. No. I'm trying to be
You can
charitable.
just say no. It's okay. Deduct $800 from my total, please.
Okay, I'll say the first one. You'll be like, oh, I should have gotten that. Car companies.
Oh, I should have gotten that.
Yeah, Ford, Chrysler, Toyota, Chevrolet, particularly American ones, but really across the board have been pretty good at staying close to 50-50. Financial services, so Charles Schwab, Fidelity, particularly the non-bank sector, again, pretty wide customer base. But here's the one that I just got really excited about. One of the most 50-50 brands in America is Carhartt.
Oh. And you're saying you wouldn't guess?
Fascinating.
It was not
think
the
that was
first
going to
one I would have guessed.
be very red?
That
Yes.
feels like a horseshoe theory
Yeah.
situation.
100%.
The way that Gen Z, has
I was going to say there's a bit
appropriated
of
Carhartt.
cosplaying, I think, going
Yeah,
on with the
fascinating.
younger fans of Carhartt.
I don't know if we can consider Carhartt a sector of
I know.
industry,
Well,
however.
Carhartt, Under Armour, they're sort of certain.
Yeah.
They cross this divide of being both tough and rugged, but also really good performance attire.
Right.
Okay, we're going to talk more about whether every dollar you spend is a vote for what you believe in. But first, we have to take a quick break so I can buy this t-shirt off Instagram.
Stop.
Welcome back. I'm Molly Roberts, and I'm here with Drew Goins and Heather Long talking about money, specifically where and how we choose to spend it.
Heather, before the break, you mentioned the sticky situation that Target is in, having to figure out, which direction to go politically, whether they lean into a customer base on the left or they try to tack back to the center. Is there a way companies can truly step back and remove themselves from politics and avoid taking a stand? Or is avoiding taking a stand taking a stand? Who will think of the poor corporations who have to make difficult decisions?
Yeah, touche. That's why I'm really fascinated by the companies that are going to basically take the shut up, no comment approach,
Right.
for lack of a
Does that mean
classier way
not
to say it.
changing their Twitter avatar to rainbow during June?
Well, you're right. It's going to be tested and it's going to be called out. And even though you're not publicly saying anything, there will still be ways to notice what's going on for really savvy consumers. I think the hard part is that if you're one of those brands like a car company that's trying to have it all ways for everybody, you're just hoping that all the rage goes against Meta and goes against the ones that are pretty far out. But you're right. I was asking myself, are we really at an inflection point? Society and for corporate America, is everything we buy, the consumer space, going to follow the same trend that we've seen in media and certainly now social media, where you're either on True Social with President Trump or you're on Blue Sky with all the Democrats? I don't know that I have a definitive answer right now. Molly, what do you think?
I don't really think we're going to end up in that place. You have all this valuable data. It comes with charts with red and blue on them, but I don't think there are very many people who are going to have that handy-dandy key loaded onto their smartphone or printed out when they walk down Main Street. I think it's a lot more obvious on a social media site where you're often talking about politics, what the political stand of a company is. You're not going to necessarily see in your coffee shop, you can't drink the coffee and say, oh, this tastes Republican, this tastes liberal, although I suppose to a certain extent you can, because more floral the flavors, more likelier it's fair trade that aligns with liberal values, but generally no. So I don't think we're going to have exactly that same problem. And I don't really think that it is incumbent on each of us to do our own research about every single thing that we purchase either, but maybe you guys disagree.
So over the last several years, going back to the beginning of Trump 1, I just kind of osmosed all this information of where I should be shopping, where I shouldn't be shopping. At the beginning of that administration, people were cutting the Nikes off their socks.
They were destroying their Keurig machines. They used to own the libs.
Told not to wear New Balance or to wear New Balance. And it's a testament to the flash in the pan nature of this that I don't remember in which direction each of those brands, was a signifier. But in the moment, when it feels like there can be intense political pressure, depending on the circle you run in, to shop in a particular place or not shop in a particular place. I mean, I'm still supposed to not eat at Chick-fil-A as a gay man. And every time I do, I feel a little bit of shame, especially when somebody catches me doing it. But in that environment, is boycotting ever an effective strategy?
It can be. And you mentioned Chick-fil-A obviously didn't totally reverse, but certainly from those early days in 2012, they have radically walked back some of that anti-LGBTQ that came out initially from their CEO, really tried to distance themselves a good bit from that. But the biggest example of all recently was the Bud Light controversy of 2023.
With Dylan Mulvaney.
When they had the trans woman in the social media ad, and there was just a huge pushback. Now, should they have known better? Again, this comes back to the data a little bit, that a brand like Bud Light and Budweiser is, one of those brands that's more low 60s Republican. And so they're in that sort of center-right gray area where, should they have shifted or not? And they obviously saw that blowback.
That is an absolutely insane brand decision to me if you know that you're in the 60s.
Just trying something new. Yeah, I think the boycotting question is really difficult. A line that you'll often hear, sometimes earnestly, sometimes ironically, is there's no ethical consumption under capitalism or late capitalism. And I'm pretty sure originally that's making just sort of the elementary Marxist point that workers are getting paid less than their labor is eventually going to be worth. But now it's transformed into this broader idea that at some point along these very tangled, twisty supply chains, behind every product we buy, something bad is probably happening. And I think there's the flip side of that. Maybe something good is happening. A great example recently was this Target question, like we mentioned earlier. Target rolled back their DEI policies. And so trying to be righteous, a bunch of people said, I'm not going to shop at Target anymore. And then a ton of Black brand owners who'd made retail deals with Target said, no, please shop at Target, because these retail deals are really valuable to us. And sure, you can go on my own website and buy the thing from me. But the fact is, if I am on the shelves at Target, that's how I'm getting more money spent on my products. And that is a much more tangible way to be supporting diversity in a given market, to be buying the product at Target than to be refusing to go to Target at all.
Yeah, I think that boycotting in today's tangled up capitalism is particularly fraught. And it's also not particularly satisfying to me as a consumer, and I think to a lot of consumers. I saw that the Reverend Al Sharpton led what he called a buy-in at Costco, which is, the reverse of a boycott, where after Costco doubled down on its DEI efforts, he brought all of these people in and said, okay, we're going to shop at Costco. And as we have seen in the kind of failure of no-buy movements over and over again, shopping is really satisfying and really fulfilling. And it feels easier to me, more attainable to actively go out and make purchases, give my money to places that do align with my values.
I mean, one of the better examples that we have of that is what people have done with their investment dollars, in the stock market. And in the past 25 years, we've really seen the growth and explosion of what's called ESG investing, being conscious of environmental impacts or governments or labor rights. And I just looked it up, and basically 25% of the world's assets, investment assets, are now in the ESG space.
Yeah.
Now you can debate what the definitions are and, but it's really interesting that people have done just what you're saying, that they've tried to affirmatively vote with their money and their values.
I think it's much more fulfilling to feel that you have actively given to something good than passively withheld from something bad. Yeah. And I just think that in an era of rampant consumption, it's the easier option too.
And I do think this is a moment where we are trying to actively do something, anything that is within our control. I think that really brings together the question we were talking about earlier, the no buy 2025, and the if we're buying, what should we buy question. Because with No by 2025, I think people feel, oh my gosh, the country's in a precarious position. My finances are in a precarious position. I'm being pushed by these social media influencers to do things that maybe I don't want to do. And I am going to step back and I am going to get that under control. And I can choose when I take out my credit card and when I don't, even if I can't choose kind of broader stroke things about my life, what my job is like. Who's president is another example. So I think that when we're choosing how to spend our money, it's the same thing. We voted in November. And fat lot of good that did. And so if voting our conscience didn't make much of a difference, maybe spending our conscience can. And because you're right, it's an age of rampant consumerism. Spending is something we are doing all the time, all day long. So when we're doing that, can we feel like with every little act we're taking, we are working for what's right? I'm a little skeptical of it. I don't think it's a bad thing that we're doing that. I understand why folks feel disempowered, but I don't think we should trick ourselves into thinking that actually we're empowered because we're spending in politically conscious ways. We should probably be focusing on still doing the harder work, even if it is really hard.
I broadly agree with that. The one caveat I would add, though, is I'm hoping that this whole momentum goes alongside a resurgence of the buy local movement. I think your marginal dollar can have a really big impact on a smaller company, whether it's something you found on TikTok or Instagram that was featured to you, or whether, it's at a local store or farmer's market.
So what I'm hearing is that I should find the super homophobic farmer's market stall and make sure nobody buys from them.
No, you need to start a competitor.
You should put your neighbor's terrible backyard kale in their stand.
Perfect. And with that, we got to wrap this up. It has been really great talking to both of you. Thanks, Molly. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, Drew.
Happy shopping.
This episode was produced by Hadley Robinson, edited by Demir Marusic, Chris Sullentrop, and Allison Michaels, and mixed by Emma Munger. Special thanks to Millie Mitra and Deirdre Byrne. Thanks for listening to Impromptu. Please send us your thoughts about today's conversation. Email impromptu@washpost.com. And if you're enjoying the show, please be sure to leave us a review or comment on your favorite podcast app.